Tonight, I'm making a claim, not telling a story. Here it is. The word Zionism has stopped doing the one job it was created to do. And I'm not going to make that case with a communications consultant or a poll. I'm going to make it with the Torah and the Talmud. 2 weeks ago, a guy got fired for basically saying a version of this out loud at a meeting. I'll give you the story in under 3 minutes. But the real argument tonight is a few thousand years older than his job title. Matthew Berger is a communications consultant. The Jewish Federations of North America hired him to figure out what language actually works when Jewish groups talk about Israel and anti-Semitism. At a retreat for young Jewish leaders in Minneapolis, one of his slides literally said, "Avoid Zionism." His reasoning: the word confuses more people than it persuades. He was fired within 24 hours. JFNA said they're proudly and unapologetically Zionist and that the slide does not represent our approach. Here's what nobody said. Nobody said that his research was wrong. Nobody disputed the data, which tells you this wasn't a fact fight. It was a loyalty test, a litmus test, if you will. And I don't think the loyalty test is the interesting part of this story. I think the interesting part is, was he right? So, what does the Jewish tradition actually say about words that stop working? The Torah edits its own language. If you like, look at the Talmud, Pesachim 3a. There's a verse in the Torah about Noah loading the ark. Instead of saying he took the impure animals, the Torah uses a 12-letter phrase instead. They are not pure, rather than the 4-letter word for impure. Now, you and I might think, oh, so what, extra letters. But when you're telling the Torah as an oral tradition, when you're writing down and copying the Torah, you don't want anything superfluous. You don't want anything extra in the text. You want the text to say exactly what you want the text to say. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi points out in the Talmud, the Torah spent 8 extra letters rather than let an ugly word stand, even though the shorter word was completely accurate. Accuracy, you see, was never the issue. The Torah is worried about what the word does when it lands. Lashon nekiyah, clean speech. The tradition isn't never say true things. That's not it. A word can be technically correct and still be the wrong word. Because words don't just describe, they have a meaning behind them. They have something behind them. If the Torah itself will spend 8 extra letters to avoid the wrong connotation, that's not a small precedent. Now again, we might think it is because I can talk all I want, I can use big words, but that's not the concept. The Torah was to be succinct to the point. You see, words don't just describe, there's a connotation that goes along with them. So that's our first source. The Talmud teaches you can change it. You can change words. Now we look at another section of Talmud, Rosh Hashanah 16b. Rabbi Yitzchak lists 4 things that can tear up a harsh decree against a person: charity, crying out loud in prayer, a change of deeds, and get this, a change of name. Shnui Hashem, a name change, is in the same category as charity and prayer. Now we're going to see what that means. Remember, he wasn't Abraham. He was Avram. His wife was not Sarah. It was Sarai. Avram and Sarai were childless. God adds one letter, a hey, and he becomes Avraham, and blessing follows. This is the reed. The old name itself had become an impediment. Not a bad man with a fine name, a good man whose name was in the way. His name had to be changed. And in Genesis 17 and 32, God renames people as their mission grows. Remember? So Avram becomes Avraham, Sarai becomes Sarah, and then their story expands. Now we jump into Genesis 32. Jacob wrestles through the night and becomes Israel. Not a punishment, not a rebrand for its own sake. The old name Jacob stops fitting a new reality. So God replaced it. It's really simple. And here's the part I want you to notice. The name Israel. The actual name sitting at the center of tonight's entire argument is itself a rename. What if we decided instead of calling it the land of Israel, we call it the land of Jacob? That would be weird. But that was the original name. It got changed to Israel. Jewish tradition, our tradition, has never treated its own names as permanent fixtures. It's treated them as tools. What happens when your hammer doesn't hammer anymore, or your saw doesn't saw anymore? It stops working. You replace it. Huh? Your car won't start? Fixing it exceeds the value. You can't, that's not worth it. You go out to wherever, and you get a new car, you replace it. You don't push it. You don't wait for it to break again. When a tool stops working, it gets replaced. And so it is in Judaism. When a name stops working, it gets replaced. So, what was Zionism actually supposed to communicate? Here's the whole case in one line. Zionism was coined in the 1890s to communicate one specific, narrow idea that the Jewish people, like every other people, deserve self-determination in their historic homeland. That's it. That's it. That was the entire job of the word. That was it. I'm telling you tonight, for a huge share of the people we most need to reach, especially under 40s, it doesn't do the job anymore. It doesn't. Ask someone on a college campus what Zionist means. You won't hear self-determination. You'll hear something closer to an accusation. The word hasn't just picked up baggage. For a lot of listeners, it stopped transmitting the original message at all. That's not the word being unpopular. That's the word failing exactly the way the Torah's impure failed. Technically accurate, functionally counterproductive. Okay. Now, I know what some of you watching and listening are thinking. Rabbi, the Torah swapped a word nobody was emotionally attached to. Avram Abraham didn't have a movement of people who fought and died under the name of Avram and then objected to calling him Abraham. Zionism, the word, has 130 years of history, a state built on it, people whose entire identity is wrapped up in that word. Retiring it isn't like adding a letter. It's giving something up under pressure. And once you give something up once, why would anyone ever stop pushing? Now, that's the strongest version of the objection. I'm not going to steamroll by it. I'm not going to gloss over it. Here's my answer. I'm not asking anyone to give up the belief. I'm not asking Jews to stop believing in the right of the state of Israel to exist. When Avram's name was changed to Abraham, it doesn't say he became a different person. It says the name was the obstacle, not the person. The name was the obstacle. The claim tonight isn't, oh, stop believing in Jewish self-determination. Oh, Rabbi Block doesn't support the state of Israel. Come on, that's not what I'm saying. It's stop assuming this specific word is still the vessel for that belief, when for a generation of listeners, it's become the opposite of a vessel. It's become a wall. Not changing belief. So no one is being asked to retreat, which I've heard from people. No one is being asked to give up anything. You're being asked something very simple. Admit the word broke. Jacob becomes Israel. I don't hear anyone running around screaming, that's not right. We have to go back. The word no longer fit. And Judaism has never treated its own language as too sacred to fix it when it breaks. Noah's Ark, Abraham's name, Jacob becoming Israel. The word serves the idea. The idea does not serve the word. And you've heard the expression, the tail wagging the dog. Well, maybe you haven't heard that expression. The dog should wag the tail. There's an idea. The dog. The tail. The idea does not serve the word. It's the other way around. The word has to serve the idea. So the dog controls the tail. We don't want to let the tail control the dog. And when we defend the word, when it no longer works, we're getting it backwards. We are actually protecting vocabulary instead of protecting the actual belief underneath it. Let's talk about the belief underneath it. Let's talk about Kurdistan, a country where the historic homelands of the Kurdish people. And there are other groups on our planet making the same argument. People, a group, are tied to a section of land. But let's not use force, let's not use violence. Let's go back to our homeland. I'm not telling anyone to stop calling themselves a Zionist. If that word still communicates clearly for them and their audience, that's a real and valid choice. What I am saying, and what I'm doing tonight, is that Jewish tradition gives us permission, more than permission. It gives us a precedent to ask the question without treating it as a betrayal. Firing Berger within 24 hours wasn't confidence. It was refusing to let the question even get asked out loud. And going back to the very first source I gave tonight, the Torah wasn't afraid of the word impure. It's used constantly, all through the book of Leviticus. It just knew when not to use it. That's the whole teaching. That's the whole teaching distilled. Never say Zionism. It's known when the word is doing its job, and know when it's gotten in the way. And we find that with other groups. Believe it, even though I'm 80, I'm not old enough to remember the panic of 18, whatever it was. But it was called a panic. Oh, that was a stock market crash. That was a depression, a recession. Economists continually change the name for this very reason. The name no longer works. It gets broken. It has a connotation that doesn't tell the story. That's what I'm saying. And when a word gets in the way, don't use it. That's all. Okay. Now, many of my co-religionists, many of my colleagues, many of my viewers want to protect the word. I want to protect the belief. And that's what the purpose of tonight's presentation. That's what I want you to leave with. A word's only job is to communicate. And we look at words that denote people of certain races, certain political sides, and they no longer mean what the word originally meant. They're derogatory, they don't work, they're broken, so you stop using them. Okay? And that's my point. A word's only job is to communicate, and when it stops, Jewish tradition doesn't tell us to defend the word for its own sake. It tells us to ask what the word was protecting in the first place, and make sure that that survives, whatever we end up calling it. And that's what I have to say tonight. Someone just asked me, good question, Rabbi, my mother converted to Catholicism but was Jewish. Am I still Jewish? The answer is yes. However, Orthodox and non-Orthodox take different approaches to that question. Non-Orthodox wants to add volition or choice. Orthodox says if you had a Jewish mother, you're Jewish, regardless of whether she converted or when she converted. Non-Orthodox says we want to start with you. Do you want to follow your mother's original tradition of being Jewish? You're Jewish. If you don't want and you want to convert into Roman Catholicism, then you're not Jewish anymore. So non-Orthodoxy adds a self-respect, a self-initiative, and that's important. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Joe, one of the things you're pointing out about research into Judaism, it's important that all of us look at other religions. And one of the biggest problems, the person that said he want to be Jewish, you're Jewish. Okay? Bear next door. And if you'd like to pursue that conversation, email rabbiblock@hotmail.com, and I have a Zoom room, and we can discuss all different things. I'd be glad to do it. I'd be glad to do that. Okay. Someone asked, what does the word goy mean? Goy means nation. And it says in the Torah, God says to the people of Israel, you're going to be a goy gadol, a great nation. There's another word that we want to, it's not broken yet, but we want to be careful. Because a lot of people take the word goy to be derogatory. And now people say, well, the word goy means not Jewish, but that's not what the Torah says. God says to the people of Israel, you're going to be a goy gadol, a great nation. So they're not saying they're going to not be Jewish anymore. So thank you for pointing that out, because that's a good example of tonight's presentation. Words have a definition. They also have a connotation, something that comes to mind when you hear the word, not the strict definition. And that's my point with Zionism. The word no longer supports the idea of a Jewish homeland. Just like the word goy has now come to mean non-Jew and not just the word nation. And so we want to be careful when we use the word goy and when we want to use the word Zion or Zionist or Zionism. Are we using it in a context and a meaning we want to convey? Okay? Plum, you're mystical. Orthodox rabbis, in referring to me and other non-Orthodox Jews, claim that we were kidnapped by gypsies and brainwashed. And if we only went to their Judaism, not just anybody's, but their one group, we would come back to Judaism and welcome it. And I found that a very strange comment, that they should say, I was kidnapped by gypsies and brainwashed. That's why I'm not following all the Jewish tenets that they believe, in the way they believe, not the way another group believes. It's fascinating. I'm reading the questions of what this pause. And support for Israel is a very difficult, the way the question's worded, because I do not support the government of Netanyahu. I do not support Israeli politics right now. I don't support annexation of the West Bank. I don't support the illegal settlements in the West Bank. I don't support any of that. So we really need to think of how we're going to ask the question. I do support the right of Israel to exist as a country. Okay? If that's what you're asking, that's different from a blanket. But I could ask, do you support the government? Do you support what President Trump is doing? Yes or no? And you'd say, give me the same answer. You'd say you support the presidency and you respect the office of president, but you don't agree with a lot of his policies and a lot of the actions he's taking as in executive orders. So we can ask that same question, but we have to be careful how we ask it and how we word it. And we want to also look at the 21st century. And I find that's very difficult to do, because a lot of us will drag into what happened in 1948, what happened in 1832, what happened in 1275. We can certainly study history. I think if we're going to have a Palestine at peace with Israel, we need to sit down and look, how can we create that given what's going on today? And not get back into that, because otherwise everyone has to leave the United States. Most of us are immigrants and the children of immigrants. We're not an indigenous population. And the same with Australia. And the same with parts of South America. Same with Mexico. And that doesn't really get anywhere. It doesn't. So we want to start with what is. and look at each other and say the Armenians deserve a country, the Kurds deserve a country, and there were people displaced out of the land when Israel was formed, and they deserve a place. Peace, not a platform for killing, and not instead of Israel. I do not agree with a Palestine instead of Israel. I agree with a Palestine with Israel, together, peaceful coexistence, recognizing the right of each other to exist, without getting into, we can do that in psychiatry. You know why you have a problem? Your father didn't play ball with you. And your mother didn't make home-cooked meals. Doesn't solve anything. Just becomes an excuse for more bad behavior. And that's what I see both sides doing now. Netanyahu's government, what's going on in the West Bank, I see that's just bad because it's not solving. And it's this game of, well, I was here first. Oh, I am Reform, but really a non-Orthodox Jew. If you like liberal, but again, there's another problem with the word liberal. Just like the word Zionist. It no longer conveys the meaning it once conveyed. That's why I like to say to people that I'm just not Orthodox. Yeah, I know. Someone just said that Netanyahu's successor replacement may be worse. I know, following Israeli politics. And also remember, Israel, unlike the Pope, Israel does not represent all Jews. Israel doesn't speak for Judaism. The Holy Father in Rome, when he talks ex officio out of his office, he does speak for the church. He has the keys of St. Peter. Israel does not have the keys of Moses. So that's something else that keeps getting thrown at me. Oh, someone just said, is your wife your sister? Only if we're in Mesopotamia and we're reading cuneiform, because they use sister and wife synonymously. Two different, they didn't think of them like we do. The terms were interchanged. Well, our 30 minutes are up. Please, if you have any suggestions you'd like for next week, email me, rabbiblock@hotmail.com, and be glad to entertain any of your topics. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and good night.